Hands behind your head, face down, now. The shout, filled with malice, tore through the quiet suburban afternoon. It was followed by the heavy, sickening thud of a body being slammed mercilessly onto the cold cobblestone pavement. A knee drove hard into the man's back, forcing the air from his lungs in a pained, desperate gasp. How did it come to this? On a peaceful, oak-lined street, where nothing like this was ever supposed to happen, just 30 seconds earlier, none of it had made any sense. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the immaculate lawns of Willow Glen Drive. In the quiet air of Fairfax County, the only sounds were the rustle of dry leaves and the rhythmic footfalls of a lone jogger. It was a scene of perfect, wealthy tranquility, a peace shattered in an instant by the aggressive shriek of tires. A Fairfax County Police Patrol SUV had swerved to the curb, cutting off the jogger's path. 2 officers got out. The driver, Officer Kyle Jennings, was young, with the fresh, uncertain face of a rookie just a few years out of the academy. His partner, Officer Ben Riggs, was shorter, more muscular, and wore a permanent scowl, as if the entire world had personally offended him that day. "Hey man, stop right there! Don't move!" Jennings shouted, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to sound more authoritative than he felt. The jogger, John Caldwell, came to a smooth halt. He was a tall man in his early 50s, his 6'5" frame still lean and powerful from a lifetime of rigorous discipline. Gray streaked the temples of his military-cut hair. He calmly removed the small wireless earbuds from his ears, pausing a podcast on the Battle of the Bulge. He showed no alarm, only a mild, questioning surprise. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong. "Is there a problem, officers?" he asked. His voice was deep and steady, a voice accustomed to being heard and obeyed without having to be raised. Officer Riggs took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance and invading John's personal space. With a small, almost imperceptible movement, he unsnapped the thumb brake on his holster. The quiet click was a sound that carried more weight than a shout. He performed a slow, insulting scan, from John's worn running shoes, up the simple gray sweatsuit to his face, as if he were appraising livestock. "We received a report," Riggs said, his voice a low, condescending drawl. "A concerned citizen saw a suspicious individual loitering, casing the neighborhood." He paused, a small smirk playing on his lips. "And, well, you fit the description perfectly." The click of the holster, the smirk, the emphasis on that final word. John knew instantly this wasn't about his sweatsuit. He'd seen that same look of smug superiority in the eyes of petty warlords and hostile border guards a world away. It was the oldest, ugliest script in the book. But years of command had built a fortress of discipline inside him, and he let the insult break against its walls. He kept his face a mask of calm. "What are you doing here?" Riggs demanded, dropping the pretense of procedure. The question was an accusation. "Where do you live?" "I'm taking my afternoon walk, officer," John replied, his voice still impossibly even and pleasant, though he could feel the immense effort it now took. "My house is just down the road." John pointed down the street with his chin. "My house is right there, number 12 Willow Glen Drive." He indicated a large 2-story brick colonial with a manicured garden just a few doors down. Officer Riggs followed his gaze and then let out a short, ugly laugh. A sneer of pure contempt twisted his face. "That house? A guy like you?" He scoffed, his voice dripping with venom. "Don't even try it. Let me guess. You cut the grass? Polish the silver, maybe? I might believe that." The raw fury coiled in John's gut, a hot, white anger that he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to break this arrogant punk, to show him what real power felt like. But a general doesn't brawl on a sidewalk. A general chooses his own battlefield. And this wasn't it. Not yet. He forced the anger down, letting the cold steel of his discipline take its place. His voice, when he spoke, had lost all its warmth. "Officer Riggs," he said, his tone dropping to a near-freezing calm, "your assumptions about my occupation are profoundly unprofessional. If you doubt my identity, I am willing to provide verification." "Oh, listen to this guy, lecturing us on professionalism." Officer Jennings, the rookie, chimed in, trying to get back on his partner's good side. "We have the right to question anyone we deem suspicious, and right now, pal, you're hitting all the marks." "Your badge numbers, officers," John stated. It wasn't a question. "I want them now." This legitimate demand seemed to snap something in Riggs. He took another aggressive step forward, his face inches from John's. "You have no right to demand a damn thing, old man," he snarled. "We asked the questions here. Now you got a record? You carrying weapons? Drugs? I have no legal obligation to answer accusatory questions without counsel," John replied, his voice now completely devoid of emotion. He was no longer a citizen trying to cooperate. He was an officer assessing a rapidly deteriorating tactical situation. "No obligation?" Riggs ground his teeth. "I'll show you obligation." Without another word, he shoved John hard in the chest with both hands. The force was sudden and brutal. John, despite his solid stance, staggered backward. He had the training to disable both of them in seconds. Army Special Forces taught a man how to turn an attacker's momentum into a debilitating injury. But he also knew the unwritten rules on American soil. Resisting officers, even rogue ones like these, was a battle you never won. It only gave them the excuse they were looking for. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" John growled, his patience finally shattering. "You dare talk back to us?" Jennings yelled, as if he'd just been given the green light. Like a pair of bloodhounds, they rushed him. John made a conscious decision not to fight back. He allowed their clumsy, thuggish momentum to carry him down. The world turned, and he met the hard, cold cobblestones with a jarring impact that shot a spike of pain up his spine. "Hands behind your head. Face down, now!" Riggs's voice, triumphant and vicious, echoed in his ear as a knee drove hard into the small of his back, forcing the air from his lungs in a pained gasp. The acrid smell of asphalt and damp leaves filled his nostrils. He could feel the cold metal of handcuffs biting into his wrists, ratcheted so tight they broke the skin. Around him, he sensed movement, neighbors peering out of their doors, their faces a mixture of fear and pity. He saw the glint of at least 3 smartphones, recording his humiliation for the whole world to see. "What's your name?" Jennings grunted, leaning close, his breath sour with cheap cigarettes. "Don't play dumb." John lay still for a moment, his cheek pressed against the cold stone. He gathered his strength. He gathered his focus. And then he spoke. His voice wasn't strained or weak. It was sharp, clear, and resonant with an authority that had nothing to do with physical position. It was the voice of command, a voice that had echoed across desert forward operating bases and brought thousands of elite soldiers to attention. "Before I give you my name," John said, each word a perfectly formed piece of ice, "I want you both to understand something with absolute certainty. Every action you have taken here, the unlawful detention, the use of excessive force, your racist and hateful language, has been recorded." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Not just by your own body cameras, which I know you're wearing, but by at least 5 different high-definition security systems on this street. Systems owned by my neighbors, people who know me very well. And I assure you," he finished, his voice dropping to a level of cold promise that made both cops freeze, "the price for this stupidity will be your careers." A flicker of Officer Riggs's former aggression returned, a weak flame against a rising tide of fear. You're threatening police officers?" he growled, but the bluster was hollow. He couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Who the hell do you think you are? Some slick lawyer?" "More than a lawyer," John replied from the ground, his voice a blade of cold steel. "Now I am giving you an order. You will call your shift commander. You will tell him you are on Willow Glen Drive and you have just arrested a man named John Caldwell." He paused, letting them absorb the instruction. "And you will tell him," he added with chilling precision, "that he needs to be prepared for a very serious conversation with someone he does not want to disappoint." The absolute, unshakable confidence in his voice hung in the air. Riggs and Jennings exchanged a nervous, wide-eyed glance. They had never encountered anything like this. The name John Caldwell meant nothing to them, but the man who spoke it, pinned and cuffed on the pavement, radiated an authority more real than their badges and guns. Something was terribly wrong. What kind of game is this?" Jennings stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "This is not a game, officer," John said. "This is my final piece of advice. Make the call before this situation gets worse for you. And believe me, it is about to get much, much worse." Jennings hesitated, his eyes darting to Riggs for guidance. But Riggs was frozen, his face a mask of confusion and dawning dread. With a trembling hand, Jennings fumbled for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is 714, he said, his voice cracking. "Patch me through to Lieutenant O'Connell." After a moment of static, he continued, "Lieutenant, this is Jennings. We're on scene at Willow Glen. We've detained a suspect." He swallowed hard. "Subject, self-identifies as John Caldwell." A heavy, crackling silence followed. Then a voice erupted from the radio's tiny speaker, a frantic, strangled shriek of pure terror. "What? Caldwell? Say that name again, Jennings. Are you out of your goddamn mind?" Jennings flinched as if struck. "General John Caldwell. My God, son. Do you know who you just put your hands on? You stay right there. Do not touch him again. I'm coming, and that man better not have a single scratch on him, or we'll all be answering to the Department of Defense." The transmission cut out, leaving a ringing silence. Jennings and Riggs stood paralyzed, the blood draining from their faces until they were as pale as death. They looked at each other in horror, and then their eyes fell upon the man they had pinned to the ground like an animal. A terrible, sickening wave of realization washed over them. You're that John Caldwell?" Riggs whispered, his voice trembling with a disbelief that bordered on worship. "The general?" John didn't answer. He just waited, his patience more terrifying than any threat. He knew the curtain was just now rising on the main act. Less than 3 minutes later, the wail of sirens tore through the neighborhood's quiet air. 2 more patrol cars and a sleek, black, unmarked SUV screeched to a halt. The SUV's door flew open, and a man in a tailored suit, Chief of Police Frank Powell, rushed out, his face a mask of panic. Behind him was Lieutenant O'Connell, looking like he was about to faint. Ignoring his own trembling officers, Chief Powell ran directly to where John lay. "General Caldwell!" the chief cried, his voice filled with horror. "My God, what happened here?" He whirled on his lieutenant. "O'Connell, what are you standing there for? Get those cuffs off the general immediately." A shaking O'Connell fumbled with the keys and hastily uncuffed John. Jennings and Riggs stood off to the side, heads bowed, shivering as if caught in a blizzard. Their careers, they knew, were over. Chief Powell helped John to his feet, personally brushing the dirt from his sweatsuit. "General, I am so sorry. There are no words for this shameful, unacceptable incident." John looked directly into the chief's pleading eyes. His own were still hard as stone. "Chief Powell," he said, his voice weary but sharp, "I think you have a great deal of explaining to do. Not to me. To the community you're sworn to protect." He pointed a steady finger at Riggs and Jennings, who flinched as if he'd fired a weapon. "These 2 officers of yours demonstrated more than a gross lack of professionalism. They displayed a blatant abuse of power and a disgusting, overt racism." He locked his eyes back on the chief. "Tell me, Chief Powell," he asked, his voice dangerously quiet, "is this the standard of conduct for the Fairfax County Police Department?" Chief Powell's face went pale, as if John's question had physically struck him. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He turned, and a terrible, righteous fury erupted from him as he faced the 2 disgraced officers. "Jennings, Riggs, what in God's name have you done?" he roared, his voice echoing down the street and startling the curious neighbors. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? You didn't just assault a citizen. You assaulted a general of the United States Army. You spat on the very honor of the badge we are sworn to uphold." He didn't give them a chance to answer. He whirled on his lieutenant. "O'Connell, sir, you will personally escort these 2 to the station. Take their statements, their weapons, and their credentials. They are on indefinite, unpaid suspension, effective immediately," he commanded, his voice like cracking granite. "I want the full incident report on my desk by just in 600 hours. I will be walking it into the district attorney's office myself. This will be handled with extreme prejudice. There will be no leniency. There will be no cover-up. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Chief." 2 other officers stepped forward and began the humiliating ritual. The audience of neighbors watched in stunned silence as Jennings and Riggs were systematically stripped of their power. The crisp sound of Velcro as their duty belts were undone. The audible click as their sidearms were removed and secured. And finally the quiet, metallic scrape as their badges were unpinned from their chests. They stood there disarmed and impotent, shivering in the cool air. Their fledgling careers had just been brought to a swift and ignominious end. As they were led, speechless and white-faced, to a separate patrol car, Chief Powell turned back to John, his face now a mask of profound remorse. "General, once again, on behalf of my department, I beg for your forgiveness for my negligence." John looked at the man for a long moment, his sharp, analytical gaze seeming to pierce the chief's soul. Then he spoke slowly, his voice tired but firm. "Chief Powell, apologies are necessary, but they are never enough." He let that sink in. "I want to see concrete action. I want real change in how you recruit, train, and supervise your officers. I want respect and fairness to be the default setting for every citizen in this county, regardless of who they are." He looked past the chief toward his own home. "And believe me, as a citizen of this county, I will be watching every step of the way." He paused. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Chief. It's been a long day." Without another word, John turned and began the short walk back to his house. The crowd of neighbors parted silently, their expressions no longer fearful or curious, but filled with a deep and profound respect. Several of them, older men who understood what they had just witnessed, gave him a slow, deliberate nod.